Welcome back. It's time to talk about Chapter 5, which is a discussion of objects and concepts, how we identify and classify information. All right, let's begin. So, first off, we have to start by giving you a new definition for the word semantic. So far, I've been using semantic to refer to your understanding of something. Semantic memory is thought of as a large network of associations and concepts. So you can see how the idea of understanding still relates. But now we're talking about I want to say thing, right? That's inside of your head, a large network of associations and concepts that underlies our general knowledge of the world. So this network holds all of the bits and pieces and all the little details that go along with all of the big concepts that you know, all the big ideas that you hold, all the knowledge of definitions, all the knowledge of how things relate. All of that is all housed in your semantic memory. Within semantic memory, there are two basic types of memory. There's procedural memory, which is your memory for how to perform skills, and it usually refers to things that can be done without having to think about it. So for those of you who can play an instrument, you probably have certain songs that you can play without even thinking about it. Some of you might be even so sophisticated in your memory, in your musical ability, that you can hear somebody else playing their instrument, playing their song, and you can sort of just pick it up and start going along with them, and you don't have to really even think about it. In fact, the more you think about it, the worse it is. That's evidence that you're relying on a procedural memory, like just the movements of your fingers or the movements of your body or whatever would be part of procedural memory. Propositional memory includes that vast knowledge base, all these details that you know, all these facts that you know. The thing about propositional memory is that these bits of knowledge that you have are what we call context independent. These are facts that you know, and you don't know how you know it or when you knew it or why you know it. You just know it. A great example for students who have, done most of their education in the U.S. is to say, when did you first find out that George Washington was the first president? And most of us have no idea how we know that. We've just always known it. It's similar to, how did you ever find out what your name was? For those of you, who were given a name at birth, and that is the name that you go by now, and that is your name, and you've never really thought about it. It's just your name. How did you ever find out what your name was? Well, you've always known it, right? Well, at some point you had to find out. We were just working with my just over 1-year-old grandson to come to his name. And so we all had a toy in our hands, and we would take turns calling him, and he would get to have the toy if he came to us, and we were trying to teach him his name. He, needs to learn it, but for the rest of his life, that'll just be his name. It's context independent. You don't know it because you can remember when you acquired that knowledge. You just know it because you know it. I've got this picture of a bunch of books, and what I like about this bookshelf, it's supposed to be a tree, but it kind of also looks like a neural network of, interconnected branching details. So if you imagine each of those books containing some detail that goes along with your basic knowledge, that would be a good example of your propositional memory. So procedural is about these skills that you can perform without any thought. Propositional memory is knowledge that you hold without any knowledge, with really no knowledge of how you know that. It just is. We'll get to other types of memory in another chapter. So, semantic memory. A lot of research in semantic memory has focused on how you get to that point where you can perform without having to really think about the task. How do you get to the point of performing like an expert? Whether it's a football player catching a pass, or it's a musician playing an instrument, or it's a person who can play chess, or it's a person who knows a lot about their subject matter and can just retrieve facts about that subject matter without having to think about it very much. It just is very readily accessible for them. How do we get to that point? We define expert performance as having considerable knowledge in a specific area. What we tend to find is that experts really do have better memory for material that's relevant to their area of expertise. A lot of times, if a person's an expert in one area, people will think that they're just sort of generally smart and they would just know a lot of things. It turns out that an expert doesn't know anything more about the fields outside of their area of expertise than anybody else does, right? They only know about their field of expertise. Now, some people are, they dabble in a lot of different fields, and so they maybe have become experts in a lot of things or have a lot more knowledge than the average person in a lot of things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are generally smarter. It just means that they, have studied a lot of things or really encoded a lot of information. So when we're talking about within their area of expertise, what we find is that experts remember more relevant details about what's going on right now that relates to their area of expertise. They know more details about their area. So for example, a chess player knows, without even really having to think about it, whether the last game that they lost, where their piece was. I don't know anything about chess. It's a really common topic for research on expertise. So I tried really hard to get basically competent at chess while I was in grad school. And I got to tell you what, I've got a chess block. I just can't do it. My son is terrific at it. My daughter's pretty good at it. And it just seems to have skipped a generation. I just can't play. I can't even remember the names of all the pieces, and I can't remember what they're allowed to do. And I have a block with chess. So I'm going to say some things that those of you who know how to play chess are going to go, that's not how it's played. But all I can say is that a person who is a chess expert, if you ask them about their last game that they lost, they can tell you where it went wrong. They can tell you the number of the square that they were on when they realized the mistake, things like that. They remember more details, and details that are relevant to the issue. Their memory on the topic is much more organized than a novice. One of the things that this I do know something about. One of the things that I learned about when I was a very young teacher was that when you are new in an area, you need to have information organized for you because you don't know enough about the subject matter to impose organization. So one of the things I started doing very early in my career is organizing my notes really in a linear fashion, right? A lot of outlining structure and things like that so that my students could see exactly what relates to each other, exactly what is like a major topic and then subtopics under it and things like that. But I had read a study that showed that if you have really organized notes, that doesn't have a big impact on your students unless they have access to those notes. And so one of the things I've done from the very beginning in my teaching career is provide my notes or my PowerPoints, now that we have PowerPoints, with the idea that you could write your own additional things on your notes. If we were sitting in class and you're taking notes, you could have your PowerPoints in front of you and you could just add on to them. You don't have to write every single thing that's on the board down. You can just write your thoughts or the examples or whatever that has caught your attention. You could just write that stuff down. So that's one of the things I learned about how to help people who don't know as much about a subject to stay organized and really see the relationships among things, because having an organized memory makes the material much more retrievable later on when you want to access that information. People who are experts in an area tend to recall the events related to their topic in the proper sequence. Like I said, with the chess player, they know where they were, what spot they were on when they realized that they had made a fatal error in the game. Here's a picture of a washing machine. I discovered apparently I'm an expert in doing the wash because anytime anybody else in the family goes to run a load of laundry, they need a lot of coaching. They don't know which button needs to be pushed first and then what button needs to be pushed next and so on. And, it's like second nature to me that I've been using this same washing machine. I've got the same model. It's newer now, but when I moved, I said, you know what, I want the same model. So I've been using the same basic one for like 5 years. And when I tell somebody else, I forget sometimes to tell them first, start off by pushing the power button. Nothing else will work until you've woken the thing up, because it's just such a natural thing for me that I can do it without thought. Go in there, push the power button, pick the cycle. And it's in fact on my washing machine, it's lined up in columns, and you have to sort of pick one thing from each column to get it to run. And so it's like push power, go push, push, push on the one on the left, go push, push on the one next to it, go push on the last one, and then hit start. So I don't even think about it. I just push my sequence of pushes. And if somebody asks me how to do it, I have to actually say that to them. Push power, go to the left-hand column. I don't remember what it is. It doesn't matter. You go push, push, push. This sequence is, oh yes, I am an expert in laundry. Yay. When provided with a scenario in their area of expertise, experts are much better at predicting what's likely to happen next than novices, people who are just learning the topic. My husband just completed taking EMT training because he's an auxiliary firefighter here in our area. And so he had actually taken EMT training back in the olden days when he was a rescue swimmer in the Coast Guard. And so he had some of that knowledge already under his belt, but you know how it is when you feel like you haven't used material in a really long time, so you feel like you must have forgotten it. So he's like, I've forgotten everything. I don't remember. I'm going to take the whole course again. And, some things have changed, strategies for CPR and things like that have changed, but the basic content is very similar. And so for him, the learning was a lot easier, and he was able to predict what was going to happen next in the training or in a scenario that was provided relevant to the training. And so his peers, not knowing he'd already had EMT training once, were like, wow, you're really good at this. Were you a nurse or something? And he kind of forgot that his EMT training might be relevant, had made him more of an expert, relative to his peers at least. And so I had to remind him, well, you do have a bit of a leg up. And he's like, but I don't remember anything from that. Like, obviously you do. And we'll get to that, what his experience, we'll get to that in another chapter, because that's a specific type of memory where you relearn rapidly. That's evidence of memory that you don't even know you have, that only comes out when you're retaught the skill. And so he did actually have a lot of it in his memory. He just had to be kind of retaught, and he learned it a lot faster the second time. But being a semi-expert allows you to be more accurate in predicting things, in knowing what's likely to come next. So expert performance has these very specific benefits for memory and for making guesses and things like that. And so a lot of times an expert seems to have even greater capabilities than they really do, because they can make these predictions about what's likely to happen. And it turns out that they're right. When my husband and I were young parents, we had little kids, and of course, babies, it takes a little while to figure out what they want and what's going on. But as they start to get a little bit older, you start to realize that they're actually telegraphing their intent. Like, you can see, we always joked that our kids had thought bubbles over their heads, like cartoon characters, like in the comics. Little thought bubble would pop up, and they would think, hey, I'm going to go pull that object off the table. So you could see their thought bubble, and you could actually prevent them from fulfilling their misdeed by going, no, right before they even got involved in it. And as the kids got older, they were like, how do you guys know what we're about to do? And we joked, we can read your thought bubble. But the thing is, we're experts in their behavior. Now, could I predict somebody else's kids' behavior? Maybe not. Right? But I could predict my kids' behaviors, because my kids' facial expression or body language or eye contact with the thing that they were going to go after. These things all gave me clues, and I'm an expert in my kids' thought bubbles. So you see all sorts of benefits from having a wide, array of knowledge in a particular area. All right. I'm going to break here. We'll come back in the next segment. We'll talk about the function of all this knowledge. How does it help us?